In this video, we're going to talk about forces. Now, forces are velocities that are applied on every single frame. They differ from setting up the initial velocities of your particle, which is what we were doing over here inside the emitter. You might recall we had world velocity and local velocity. These velocities that are inside the emitter are applied to your particle the moment it's born, and it's just going to continue along with that velocity unless you apply a certain amount of damping. And damping is actually something we'll talk about later. For the time being, I'll go ahead and just set that back to 1. Now, forces are a little bit different. As I said, they're going to get reapplied on every single frame. This is really good if you want to simulate something like gravity. Because gravity is a force that literally gets applied to you constantly.
Right, it's an additive effect. So that force is going to add a little bit of energy to your particle on every frame.
That's right. If the real world was like a game, then every single frame of that game, gravity would pull you down just a little bit faster, which is why objects tend to accelerate when you drop them. You can have the exact same thing happen. And you can choose the axis in which you want this to take place. Just realize that these forces are in world coordinates. It wouldn't make any sense to have a local force applied, though I can think of some ways that it'd be pretty cool. That's just not the way that it actually works here inside of Unity. So as a quick for instance, if I was to take our y force and say, let's set it to, I don't know, -3, not 0.3, excuse me, I hit the wrong number. So at -3, you can see that my particles start to take a downward turn. And there is a nice arc here. Now, if I come back up to my velocity and take local x and just set it to 0, then the particles all start to kind of fall off. And there is some acceleration. And if you take a look, you can start to kind of spot the acceleration because the particles are starting to separate a bit more as you get a little lower down our column here. If I pull them up into the air a little bit, and then we take our energy and increase this, say to, well, let's just make them live for 3 seconds. You'll start to notice that separation from the velocity really get a lot more prevalent. Now, the reason I'm doing that is because we are capturing at 10 frames a second, and it can be a little difficult to gauge velocities at that kind of a capture rate. If you're following along and you start playing with the forces, you're going to see exactly how that works and how the force keeps getting added to offer acceleration in any axis. Now, of course, you don't have to just use the y-axis, but it is the easiest way I can think of to have gravity. But if you want, you can have a force that gets applied, say, in x. And see that starts to kind of blow the particles away. You can also apply random forces as well. So let's say I did just throw in something that was kind of like gravity. So we say -3. By the way, this, you might notice, this doesn't really correspond directly to real-world gravity. You're generally, and I got to use generally because I'm sure there's some example where it would work, but you're not going to be setting this to like -9.8 meters per second or anything like that. You do need negative numbers if you want to go down, but that's all there is to it. Now, we can also apply random forces. These are plus or minus forces, just like with velocities. So if I take x and z, for instance, and set these to, I don't know, let's just go with 2 and 2, we start to get this spreading kind of cone effect because there are forces also being applied to spread those particles out. And if we were to increase their lifespan, you can already start to see it here. It's not a direct cone as the velocity would give you. It's actually starting to fan out a little bit at the base because those particles are accelerating as they move away along those axes. So that is a quick rundown of forces. Again, it's just a velocity that is constantly going to be applied. You do have to be a little bit careful with it because it's real easy to get your particles to start flying at insane speeds if you crank the number too high. But that will wrap things up for this video. Thanks a lot.